Imagine a new kind of investing, a potentially life-changing way to invest that honors biblical principles, the kind of principles that you and I grew up with. Since 1994, Timothy Plan has made biblically responsible investing possible, offering mutual funds and ETFs that are filtered for biblical principles. Don't compromise your values. Invest with Timothy Plan. Ask your financial advisor or call Timothy Plan at 1-800-TIM-PLAN. Again, that's 1-800-846-7526 and discover what it means to be a biblically responsible investor. Investing involves risk, including possible loss of principal. Before investing, carefully consider a fund's investment objective, risks, charges, and expenses contained in the prospectus available at timothyplan.com. Read carefully before investing. Mutual funds distributed by Timothy Partners Ltd. and ETFs distributed by Foreside Fund Services LLC. As a paid testimonial, there is no guarantee of future performance and each experience will differ. Well, hello, welcome to another edition of the MemoPOD. I'm glad that you took the time for us today, and I'll tell you, this isn't going to be a lot of fun to get into. I know we are now, 6 days away from the attack that took place or began in Israel back last Saturday. But I want to spend a little time talking about that. I've written about it. I did a short video for it for Not the Beast, so maybe you've seen that. But I wanted to spend a little bit of time on the MemoPOD today discussing it. So that's going to be the free portion of the MemoPOD today, talking a little bit about not just what happened, but more significantly, even more importantly than that to me, is the response that American lawmakers had to it. Whereas obviously the top concern is for the lives of the innocent and all of that in that part of the world. What we Americans need to pick up on from all of this is where some of our lawmakers are, and it's not good. It's not good at all. So that's what we're going to get into here on the free portion of the MemoPOD today. In the second half, we're going to switch gears entirely and talk about, several of you know the guy out in Colorado, the baker out there in Colorado, Jack Phillips, the guy that does the baking, the cake, the Masterpiece Cake Shop is what it's called. It's I know it's Phillips. Is it Jack Phillips? Yeah, it's Jack Phillips. What he has gone through before about the gay couple that wanted him to bake their wedding cake and all of that, and he said, you could buy a pre-made cake, but I'm not going to cater to and use my talents for something that goes against my convictions. And it's been a never-ending assault, and it's still going on. Different people, but same movement. And the latest has now been filed in court. So I wanted to get into that and whether or not the term persecution should really be used for this kind of stuff, or if there's a better way of saying it. But all of that will come up in the second half for those of you who are paid subscribers. I think it's something important for Christians to be mindful of, to pay attention to. But let me start here. I do my best. I do the best that I can. And you just have to take my word for it there. And maybe you think I could do a better job of it. I know some of you are frustrated that I try to do a better job of it. Some of you have been around longer and you remember maybe my tone being a little different before, and you kind of wish it was still that same way. I always feel bad when I get those emails, and I know I shouldn't. I mean, I am who I am, but I do sometimes feel like I've let people down. That, I thought you were a champion. I thought you were, and now you're more mealy-mouthed, and now you're more, they don't say forgiving. That would be nice. But anyway, I do give it my best shot to avoid political idolatry and tribalism. I give it my best shot to try to see the perspective that other people who believe differently than I do, that they have. And certainly I know I've gotten better at, and with the help of the Holy Spirit, I've gotten better at this, not expecting ungodly people to act in godly ways. I think that's one of the biggest mistakes that we Christians make, is we get really put out when ungodly people just behave according to their worldview. According to what? I'm going to act in a certain way because of what it is that I believe in my heart and in my soul. And sometimes I will act in ways that don't go along with that. It's called sin. And I don't like that, and I want to overcome that. But I do want to be obedient to what drives me and what I believe to be real. It's not any different with the world. They may not worship God, but they worship a God, small g, and they are fervently acting in accordance with his will, which his or her will, them. They're gods of their own little universe. They believe that's the way things are, and that's what drives them. And so I should not be surprised when they do that. Now, I can try to point out why that's foolish. I can try to point out why that's a dead-end road. I can try to point out how that's contradictory, self-contradictory, and it's going to fall apart, and it's not a good way to build your life, and I want to do all those things. But getting mad that people don't obey God when they don't even believe in him, or if they believe that he's out there, they certainly don't agree with the idea of his lordship, it's kind of fruitless and pointless, and I don't think is very appealing to them. So, again, that's maybe a little bit too much background in all of that. But I do try to see from other people's perspective why they're acting and doing the things that they're doing. And I do try to understand that there will be believers that have different political beliefs than me and come to different conclusions. And I try my best to understand that as well. So with all of that said, I could not see a circumstance where it made sense to me. And therefore I agreed with, I understood with any of the criticism that was aimed at the Biden administration. Do I think sometimes Biden gets picked on for things that really aren't his fault? Yeah, I actually do. I think all presidents get blamed for things that they aren't really responsible for, just like I think all presidents get credit for things that they really shouldn't be getting the credit for. That's the nature of the presidency. But I can accept that. I can acknowledge that sometimes Joe Biden isn't really the guy who's at fault. The gas prices. Could he be doing things that would help the situation? Probably. Could he be doing things that are messing up the situation? Most definitely. But do I think that the sole increase in gas prices is due to Joe Biden? Same thing with inflation. Has he botched things that have caused inflation to become it, and some of the silly fiscal policies that he followed, has it made it worse? Sure, but I don't think inflation is a problem today solely because of Joe Biden. So I think that there's criticism that gets aimed his way as part of tribalism. And I really don't want to participate in that. Blame somebody for what they're responsible for and give them credit for things that they did and did well and judge people according to their actions. I try to make that my model. Now, it's tough because you're hearing all these voices that accuse people or that praise people, and you got to kind of sift through as best you can. I'm not perfect at that. But when it came to the lack of response last Saturday, it took a half a day for the President of the United States of America to offer any kind of official statement that condemned what were the murderous invasions of Israeli neighborhoods, Israeli communities, Israeli homes and businesses that were committed by Hamas terrorists. There is simply no reason, none, that the President of the United States should take over half a day to come out with a statement. It was deafening silence, not in our era today. Now, if you go back to 1941, when the news of Pearl Harbor was breaking, can I understand why in real time FDR wasn't out there on the radio talking about it? Well, sure. We're putting bits and pieces together. We don't really know what's unfolding. Okay, you could have just gotten on Twitter and seen what was happening in Israel because they were posting cell phone videos. It was right in front of your face. News travels a lot quicker now. There's no reason the President of the United States, it was deafening silence. And I'll tell you, it was unacceptable from a multitude of angles. Let's look at the different angles here. You have, by the way, I never mentioned this. I should have done this at the very beginning. I'm in a different location. Many of you know we're going through a move right now, so for the time being, the heck hole is not usable at this point in time. We're doing our best to preserve it and move it to a new location and equip it there, but right now it's not usable. It's not functional. And so that's why I'm in a different location. Got the American flag, though, and some cardboard cutouts on either side. No, I'm not showing you their faces because you'd wonder why I have them. No, I mean, like, it would be... What did I just do? No, I don't want to switch. Well, I clicked a button and something freaked out on me. I'm still here, right? Yeah. All right, I'm just going to give you a quick peek who they are, okay? Yep. You saw them, didn't you? All of those, and that's just 4 of the, what are there, 12 or 13 in this room? All of them were gifts. All of them. I'm going to sit up a little bit. I'm slouching. But I slouched so that you couldn't see those back there. Okay, I totally got off topic. I think it's unacceptable from 3 different angles. Let's look at each of them. Okay, first of all, a moral perspective. Egregiously passive to wait that long, to not immediately come out, call for Hamas to cease and desist, or face the wrath of not only Israel, but all of Israel's friends. Absolutely. When you see what was happening right there, I mean, you've got a progressive movement, and Joe Biden is the face of the progressive movement, even though I don't really think he knows what's going on. He is the face of that movement. He chose to be the face of that movement. That's who put him into office. And they pride themselves, progressives do, on what I think is a silly pretension. I don't think it's true, but they want us all to believe that they are champions of women and they're champions of human rights. Okay, the sight of those videos of young Israeli women dead who had been tortured by Hamas, and they had stripped them naked and were driving them through the streets, or at least stripped them down to their underwear and were driving them through the streets. Horrific. Any movement that prides itself as a champion of women or a champion of human rights, how does it take half a day? From a moral perspective, absolutely stunning that there was not thunderous, immediate condemnation and threats. Okay, what about a strategic perspective? This was kind of revealing and gross. The Biden administration in the last month or two, unfroze $6 billion in assets to Iran. Now, it all had strings attached, and I know there were a lot of Biden surrogates who were out, and they said repeatedly over and over that $6 billion that the administration just sent to Iran, that they unfroze, it had not gone to fund, not a penny of it had been spent to fund the activities, the assault on October 7th. Several years ago, when I was talking to some of my fellow teachers about their participation in the local teachers association, and the reason that I didn't join, and whereas I wanted to support locally my fellow teachers, and I believed in them and what they were wanting to do here, I couldn't say the same thing about our state level teachers association. I couldn't say the same thing certainly about the National Teachers Association. And so I just wanted to contribute my funds locally because I knew these people and I knew what they were doing with those funds and what they wanted to accomplish. And they were taking in small funds for the local anyway, just to do some staff building activities and things like that. I'm totally on board with that. And one of the things that they told me was, well, we don't agree with a lot of the politics of the national or the state level associations either. But we just check the box that says we don't want our money going to fund these political causes. And I said to them at the time, I get that. And I appreciate that. And for my first couple years teaching, I'd gotten the pressure to join and I trusted these people. They were my teachers before because I came back to the school where I taught. And so I was a member. But even not checking the box, here's where my conscience took me. I'm still funding the organization. So yeah, I'm not paying for the political activities, but I'm paying the salary of the staff and the board that makes the decision to use other funds to fund those political activities. I mean, it's 6 of one, half dozen of another, at least as far as my conscience goes. Okay, it's the same principle here. The exact same principle here. You can tell me all you want that not a penny of that $6 billion that was sent to Iran is going to fund those terror activities. But Iran is funding Hamas. Hamas is doing this stuff. The money that Iran is spending on Hamas, they're able to spend on Hamas because they have $6 billion from the United States that are going to fund other things that they would have to be funding instead of sending money to Hamas. It's amazing. And I'll tell you, just the optics alone are horrendous for our country. That we sent $6 billion to a country that is funding terror attacks on one of our two greatest allies. No, strategically, how does the president not come out and say that? How does he not immediately respond to that? Because we knew, and Iran was applauding the actions of Hamas. And then you got the political perspective on this. It was a nightmare. Just if you were a Democrat, this was a nightmare. Joe Biden has been dogged his entire term for being completely unaware of his surroundings, utterly incapable of conducting the duties of his office. That's what people have said about him, that he has no alertness, he has no competence, he's known to sleep in on the weekends. He's taken more vacation days than any president in American history in one term. He naps frequently. We know that. He calls a lid for the day on press before the day even starts. His feebleness has become kind of a standing international joke. It's becoming an embarrassment. You have multiple countries whose comedians and whose news reporters and even whose officials, elected officials, laugh at Biden's weakness. Well, nobody was laughing at Biden's weakness in Israel on Saturday. So from every angle, just a disaster. But I want to say it was not just President Biden that I think deserved harsh criticism for their response or their lack of response to these Palestinian terror attacks. The Palestinian-friendly lawmakers in the Democrat caucus in Congress, at first they were silent, and then I believe that they were intentionally cryptic in the words that they used. I'll start with Representative Ilhan Omar. She has a history of pro-Palestinian and anti-Semitic remarks and sloganeering since she's come to Congress. That's been her mode of operation. And she offered what appeared to be, on the surface, a condemnation of the slaughter in Israel. But upon close inspection, she did more than that. And you can look up her tweet, but in the tweet, she used these words. She referred to, quote, "Such senseless violence will only repeat the back and forth cycle that we've seen." All right. It is wholly appropriate that she condemned the actions of Hamas to be senseless violence, because that's what it was. But it is wholly inappropriate, it is outrageous and offensive that she suggests that those actions are somehow furthering the back and forth between the two. That's attempting to indict Israel for similar actions to what Hamas has done. Now, can you point to times where innocent Palestinians have died because of an Israeli raid or the actions of a military operation by Israel over the years? Absolutely you can. And every single one of those, while tragic, came as a result of a duly military response, a duly orchestrated and implemented military response with military targets to an action that had been taken by Hamas. It was retaliatory. So Israel is responding to attacks on them. They never provoked. And I would defy Ilhan Omar to show me one time that was different than that. Israel has not engaged in unannounced, even in their retaliation, they announced the strikes were coming on Saturday. That's the nature of Israel, and Israel's not perfect. But to suggest that they conducted sneak attacks on purely civilian targets for the sole purpose of murdering innocent people, that's not, you can't show me. That is the side, that is the action and the character of one side in this conflict, and one side only. And Ilhan Omar's intimation that it's both sides, that reveals a stunning ability to draw moral equivalence between terror attacks and the military response that those terror attacks provoke. That isn't good. That isn't good in a lawmaker. in the United States. Meanwhile, her fellow Democrat representative, Ayanna Pressley, part of the squad, as they called themselves, she is a woman who has repeatedly engaged in slanderous attacks against Israel from the floor of the House of Representatives. She offered a thinly veiled moral equivalence as well. In her tweet, she called for, quote, immediate ceasefire and de-escalation. Okay, now this is while Israel was just preparing its retaliation. She goes out, Israeli blood flowing in the streets, Hamas terrorists, for the most part, still trying to attack and torture and kill and take hostages. And she calls for the immediate ceasefire and de-escalation. Now that is framed as an appeal for peace. Well, that's all well and good, but in actuality, it would, if, as I suspect she knows and understands, it would accomplish the precise opposite of bringing about peace. Without a forceful and devastating response from Israel to all of this, what is the lesson that would have been taught from Saturday's attacks? What would the Israeli civilians have been taught? What would Hamas have learned from the whole thing if Israel does not engage in a devastating response? Ron DeSantis, Florida governor, his press secretary, Jeremy Redfern, he calls Ilhan Omar and Ayanna Pressley, and I think there's a couple others in there, he calls them the Hamas caucus. Well, he issued a response to this, and he's exactly right. Here's what he said, quote, terrorists don't get to drag families out of their homes, murder or kidnap and torture them, and then kindly ask for a ceasefire. That's not how it works. That's like when you're playing, this is a terrible analogy, when you're playing tag and you tag somebody and then you call timeout. That's what Hamas is doing, attacking and murdering Israelis and then saying, okay, ceasefire. It doesn't work that way. There is no moral equivalence between these two sides, and Americans have to know that. The peace that is evading Gaza right now, the Gaza Strip where these Palestinians are and are causing all the ruckus, the peace that evades Gaza is only because the Palestinians that live there, they're either fueling Hamas or they are beholden to Hamas. They refuse to be peaceful. That's why there's no peace there. And I know that to be the case because Muslims and Jews coexist without violence in other areas of Israel. So why not in Gaza? If the Palestinians in Gaza really had desired it, if you know anything about the Gaza Strip, if you've ever seen pictures of it, if they would have desired it, they could have turned their entire area, they could have turned that entire area into a thriving, prosperous, tourist-laden beach resort location. It would have been a destination location for people around the world. If they had wanted that, if they truly wanted peace, but instead they chose endless jihad. That was their choice. And there is absolutely no reason that Israel should be expected to continue tolerating it. Or at least I'll put it this way, I'm not going to call on them to tolerate it. And I don't think America should call on them to tolerate it because I don't think we'd tolerate it. At least I hope we wouldn't tolerate it. No reason Israel should do that. And I'll also add there is no reason Americans should continue tolerating the congressional career of lawmakers who disagree with that. And we really shouldn't continue tolerating a presidency that is incapable of saying those very things because they're too tired or unaware of what's going on. So those are my initial takes at all of this, and I'm interested in your thoughts. You can send them my way, peter@peterheck.com. That is peter@peterheck.com. I would love to hear from you and get your thoughts on the whole thing. Again, that was from a week ago, and things have taken place in different circumstances now. But to me, that's stuff that Americans have to learn. That's the most pressing thing for us. Who leads us, and where are they leading us? So your thoughts, peterheck.com, or you can comment below right there. If you are a free subscriber, this is where we have to say goodbye. If you're a paid subscriber, stick with me. On the other side of this break, on the other side, We're going to dig into this Jack Phillips stuff. Is persecution the right word for it? And how should Christians be responding to this? What should we be preparing for? Should we be preparing for anything? Is this part of being a Jesus follower, just accepting this kind of stuff? I want to dig into all of that, share with you my thoughts, and get yours. But before everybody goes our separate ways, paid subscribers sticking with me, free subscribers, those of you who aren't going to say, I want to know what you're about to say, and go ahead and crank it up, take it up to the $10 a month, just give us a shot, see? I really think this stuff is important for us to know what we're doing and how we should respond to. So I would love it if you would upgrade and support us and go to that $10 a month, or if you want the cheaper $100 a year. But before anybody goes anywhere, next week, the plan is that my family's going to be on vacation. I'm hoping that's going to happen. I will still have a written memo for those of you who are paid subscribers, and we should have the Bible teaching. I'm going to try to get that ready before we leave on vacation. But I won't have time. It'll be too early. I won't have time to do a MemoPOD for next week. So I'll be off a week with the MemoPOD. So this one's going to have to hold you for 2 weeks. There is a memo coming, and there is the Bible teaching coming. Bible teaching goes to everybody. Memo goes just to the paid subscribers. But just wanted you to have a heads up that that's what was on the horizon. All right? Good deal. Free subscribers, I'll see you in 2 weeks. Paid subscribers, hang tight. Be right back.
The Memo with Peter Heck.
Please patronize and thank all the sponsors of the Heck podcast, including McGonigal's Buick GMC, Terrell's Auto Service, Norris Insurance, Stevens Machine, Creative Financial Center, Indiana Right to Life, Tri-Green Tractor, the Indiana Family Institute, Hartman Family Farms, Liberty Financial Group, the Wyman Group, and J. Watson Creations.
Hey there, welcome back to the MemoPOD. Hope that you are checking these guys out. Yep. I need to stop doing this because every time I don't know which direction I'm going and I'm seeing the reverse in them. Anyway, CFD, our friends over at Creative Financial Design, wonderful people, and they will help you with your finances. That's for financial planning if you want to. I'm talking about like for your retirement, making sure that you are true to your values, making sure that the money that you are investing in mutual funds, that money is not going into these companies, these woke companies that are warring against your values. If you knew and you saw, some of you make the determination, I'm not going to go and spend my money at Target. Okay, that's great. And why? Because you want to be a good steward of your resources. That's a fine decision to make. And you got that clean conscience. But what if you knew that you have a huge chunk of money in your mutual funds that's being invested in Target and helping prop up Target and everything that they're doing, helping their bottom line? Well, that's the whole reason you're not going and shopping at Target. So you're fighting against yourself. Well, how do you know if that's happening? Well, you can't know. It's mutual funds. You can. Values-based investing, which is what CFD does. I do values-based investing, have the clean conscience, and my portfolio has worked out really well since I've gone that way. As well as you could expect it to in the markets that we've had. We've consistently been, and I can't promise it would be that way for you, but consistently been above what regular market performance has been. Is that God blessing or is that just luck? I don't know. But I'm telling you, you're not taking one for the team to call CFD. You're helping us out because they're a friend and supporter of us. And so if you let them know that you saw it here, that's a big benefit to us and our ministry. But it's helping you as well and your conscience. All right, let's dive into this. I struggle, and you may get upset with me about this, but I struggle to ever apply the term persecution to what happens to Christians here in the United States, at least at this point. And I know there's legal harassment, there is cultural discomfort. Sometimes people do lose their jobs because of their faith in Christ or their convictions. But I really have always struggled to use the word persecution, and maybe that is the word, and I should get over it. But I've struggled with it. Although Pew puts out absurd numbers where they suggest like 66% or 70% of the population are Christian. Okay, that's absurd. It's laughable. Our culture would not look like it does if those numbers were anywhere close to being accurate. But there is no question that wearing the name of Jesus, even if it doesn't entitle you to public esteem anymore, wearing the name of Jesus in this culture does not subject you to the kind of enmity and hostility that it does in many places around the globe. It's just, that's the way it is. When I think persecution, here's what I think. I think the Coptic Christians from a few years ago. You remember that? They were placed in the orange jumpsuits and they were set out there on the beach, and the ISIS members in front of the cameras just executed them right there out on the beach for being Christian. That's what I think of when I think of persecution. I think of the hundreds of Nigerian Christians who are slaughtered now with regularity by the militant Fulani herdsmen. They rape, they pillage, they destroy with impunity, and nobody's stopping them. I think that's persecution. Then I go back into history, and I think the early church, what happened in Rome when Nero would take them and he facilitated extraordinary, awful torture, monstrous methods of execution for anybody that followed Jesus. He scapegoated the Christians. That's persecution. The gladiators and the animals that they were ripped limb from limb, that's persecution. I think of the stones, those large, jagged, bone-crushing stones that pelted men like Paul and Silas and Stephen in that first century. That's persecution. And so I look at those horrors and I think that's why I struggle. And I'm not alone. I think it's reasonable why I struggle. I think it's reasonable why many other believers struggle to label the financial, the punitive, the economic hardships that are becoming increasingly common to Christians in America because of a person's allegiance to biblical convictions. I struggle to call that true persecution. And maybe this is just a semantic thing and I need to get over it. Maybe it's word quibbling and I'm not helping anybody with it. So just set that to the side. Set the whole question of whether or not it's persecution or whether it's harassment or whatever word you want to quibble over and use. Set that to the side. I don't think that any dispassionate person, meaning a person that's not involved in the situation itself, any person who is not encumbered by some slavish devotion to radical LGBT etc politics, I think that any dispassionate person can look at the ongoing harassment of Colorado baker Jack Phillips and conclude that the expression of his Christian faith hasn't been and isn't being the singular impetus behind what is now a decades-long attempt to destroy his life and his livelihood. I don't think any dispassionate person can look at what's happened and say that it's not his Christianity that has caused all this. It's very obvious that that's what it is. It's simple. It's straightforward. Phillips has taken a very direct line. Here's what he has said from the start. What was it, 10 years ago now? He said from the very start, when this was all about baking a gay wedding cake, Phillips said, I will serve any customer of any background, of any creed, of any religion, of any sexual proclivity. You walk into my shop, you look like whatever you look like, I'll sell you a birthday cake. I'll sell you cupcakes. I'll sell you whatever I've got here. Anybody can come in, regardless of their faith, regardless of their fetish, and they can buy a cake at Masterpiece Cake Shop. Anybody. However, I will not, Phillips said, customize cakes to celebrate events or actions that offend the character of God. So sure, a gay person can come in and buy a cake and take it home for their wedding. They can come in and buy a standard wedding cake and haul it out for their gay wedding. Phillips isn't going to know any different, and he's fine serving anybody. What Phillips will not do is decorate Mike and Matt nuptials with a big heart around them. He's not going to customize in a way that he believes would offend God. That's always been his position. And after years of having to defend at great cost what is an obvious constitutional privilege, the Supreme Court finally upheld his right to conscience. It had to go, he's got a right to conscience as well. He can stay conscious. It had to go all the way to the Supreme Court. No reason something like that. That is First Amendment 101. And now, NBC reports that a transgender individual has brought lawsuit against Jack Phillips and his cake shop for not creating a blue, white, and pink, the colors of transgenderism, cake to celebrate, customized to celebrate his or her, I'm not sure which, gender transition, sex change. NBC ran with the story. And what I loved was all the people that called out NBC, because NBC said, well, this baker, Jack Phillips, he won his Supreme Court case on a technicality. But now he's being challenged again. Okay, that is biased reporting, big time. Phillips did not win his case on a technicality. Only for Christians, apparently, is the right to conscience and the right to freedom of expression. Only for Christians is that a technicality. But the mindset of the Associated Press, because it's the Associated Press that wrote the story that NBC then promoted on an entire section of their website, NBC, that is dedicated solely to promoting and propagating this religious out theology. It's called NBC Out. If you go to NBC.com, one of the subheadings, one of the sections, I got sports, I got this, they've got out. It's all gay stuff. What the Associated Press said in this, that was promoted there on NBC's Out page, I think it's worth noting. Here's what it said. Colorado's highest court said Tuesday it will now hear the case of a Christian baker who refused to make a cake, listen to these words, celebrating a gender transition. Then the story goes on, but remember those words, celebrating a gender transition. Story goes on, he was sued, Jack Phillips, by Autumn Scardina, a transgender woman. So that means a dude that is dressing up as a woman. Autumn Scardina sued Phillips after Phillips and his suburban Denver bakery refused to make a pink cake with blue frosting for, what they say, her birthday and to celebrate her gender transition. Did you hear that? To celebrate her gender transition. Notice those phrases that I've told you to remember. The activists bringing these lawsuits and the activists who are reporting on these lawsuits, they're not even trying to veil it. The Supreme Court of the United States has already ruled that Jack Phillips' right to conscience precludes him having to celebrate an act that he doesn't want to celebrate because of his Christian convictions. Now, if Mr. Scardino wanted to buy a cake for his personal celebration, he was more than willing to do so. He was more than able to do so. He could go in and do it. Jack Phillips was more than willing to sell him that cake. What he is not allowed to do, and what he should never be allowed to do, is to harness the power of government to force someone else into involuntary servitude. You know what that is, right? Involuntary servitude, 13th Amendment, slavery. You cannot force someone to do work for you. You can't do that. But that's what he was at. You cannot legally force somebody to celebrate or promote something that they don't want to celebrate or promote. And that's what's being asked here. And the fact that these individuals, the fact that these activists continue to bring the cases against this same man, it indicates, number one, there's a frightening personal vendetta. And it should demonstrate also how well-funded and how committed this group is to proselytizing their faith by legal force. Now keep in mind, this is the same movement that decried all laws that banned gay marriage because those were predicated upon what? Upon the Christian religion, the Christian faith, the Christian teaching on marriage. And the law should not be enforcing a religious code. But now that the religion of the age has shifted, and it's this out theology. It's gender ideology. It's LGBT etc ism. That's the spirit of the age. Now all of a sudden, we want to harness the power of government to compel other people to worship the same way, to compel other people to engage in the practice of your faith and your religion. That's what Christians need to have their radars up for. Yeah, I don't like the term persecution, and you may be like me, and you may not like the term persecution. If you don't, call it harassment, call it legal stalking, call it whatever you want to call it. But the important thing here is that it becomes exceedingly evident to everyone watching who the radicals are and who the radicals aren't. Jack Phillips, doing his job, will sell a cake to anybody. He's just not okay with the government forcing him to use his talents and his skills to do work for somebody else when it violates his conscience. That's pretty American. And those seeking to harness the power of government to force involuntary servitude on another individual, to compel them to bake the cake, more than that, to make the cake and worship with them, those are the radicals. And I think more needs to be brought up about that. And I'll also add the journalists that continue carrying the water for those fascists. And that's what that is, it's fascism. They also need to be outed as the radicals in this environment. Your thoughts welcome. Peter at peterheck.com. That is Peter at peterheck.com. I'd love to hear from you. You can also comment down below right there as well. Don't forget what I said in the first half of the podcast today, and that is next week, you'll all be getting a memo, okay? You'll also be getting the Bible teaching. I'm hoping, that's the plan, if I can get it pulled together. And I really think that I can. And then, but you will not be getting this MemoPOD for next Friday. So we'll have to wait until the next week. I appreciate you giving me the one day off, that one excuse to get out of there, to spend time with the fam. That's the plan. And so I'll wish you the best on that Friday. I think you can pull through. All right. Let me know what you think about any of this stuff. peterheck.com. Continue to pray for the innocent people, obviously in Israel and around the world that are struggling, and that God would avenge as well as protect and bless those innocent people. Okay? We'll see you I'll see you like this if you're watching in a couple weeks, but I'll see you on Monday for the memo. Okay? Can't wait.